I'm Mike Sigmund. This videotape is about taiji forms in general and in specifics the way they're done using what's known as internal strength. Most forms in all the martial arts have to do with applications. Initially, there were no forms. A particular fighting style in the martial arts would have some fairly neat applications that they would practice over and over again. And then gradually, over a period of time, these were linked in a sequence which became the form that was inherent to that particular style of martial art. Now, in most cases, how you do the form in terms of the application has certain parameters, but nowhere near the specifics that the internal strength martial arts must be done with. The internal strength martial arts, such as taiji, xingyi, bagua, liaho bafa, wuji chuan, tai shui, whatever, there's a lot of them, all have in common a particular way of moving the body which is actually very different from the way the body is moved normally. So the techniques themselves are very good in most cases, but primary to the particular martial art is how the body is moved. Secondary is the techniques. Okay, what is internal strength? It's very difficult to define internal strength into exactly one category. What we'll be dealing with will be strictly the physical parameters. In addition to the physical parameters, there will be things such as the overall body health, chi flow, so forth and so on. This particular form of strength is mechanically very, very efficient. As you become more and more skilled in it, it becomes more powerful, and that skill in the technique and usage of internal strength increases quite a bit as you get older, rather than actually atrophying and beginning to deteriorate as you get older, as happens in normal strength. Okay, now currently, particularly in the United States, but all over the world, most of the internal strength forms are practiced without much attention being paid to this particular way of moving. So we will be dealing quite a bit with exactly how the movements go. The way that they are taught nowadays without the vestiges of that strength makes it very difficult for somebody to convert. So try to pay attention to how this is done. If it's applicable in what you're doing, use it. Begin to incorporate it. There's an old saying in taiji particularly that taiji is easy to learn but very difficult to correct, and that's very true. So if you're going to go back and use some of these techniques, go very slowly. Learn to repattern the body to incorporate those, and take your time. It does take time. Okay, on the first tape that we did, which a lot of the material on this tape refers back to, a lot of gross, exaggerated movements were used, and we'll do exactly the same thing in this tape. The movements will be highly exaggerated and gross, and then we'll see how it evolves from there. Okay, now in the martial art itself and what the form is used to practice, there are factors other than just its internal strength. Of course, there's neutralizing and some of the techniques which are specific to taiji, so forth, that are quite good, and we won't be dealing with those either. Okay, but most of us are not training to be fighters anyway. We are training to get this form of internal strength to help our day-to-day life. It helps in conjunction with the qigongs, which sometimes we practice on the side or with the taiji. But this basic strength is something we're looking for, and that's what will be mainly dealt with during the tape itself. Okay, let's take a quick look at the history of taiji very quickly. Most of the taiji itself did not start until the 1600s. Filtering into taiji, starting with this, the 1600s, and this now, filtering into taiji was known and acknowledged at the time were techniques and approaches from actually many other different martial arts of the time. Okay, and from this Chen style, which is actually considered the parent of all the other taiji forms, we have the main offshoot in the world today, the Yang style, which was learned from the Chen family and then propagated through the Yang family until today. There is a form early on that was developed by Wu Yushang, who studied with Yang Luchan, and he also learned a form of the Chen style taiji at Jiaobao village, but that's still a part of the Chen form itself, and that's developed on till today. There's a form that was known as the Wu style, which is made popular by Wu Zhenqian, but essentially it comes straight out of the Yang lineage itself. And then last but not least of the traditional forms that are recognized today is the Sun style. But the Sun style is actually a Yang style derivative which incorporates Xingyi and Bagua. So in this case, it synthesizes several martial arts which are not really Tai Chi. So in many cases, we won't be discussing the Sun style because of those elements which involve Xingyi and Bagua. Okay? So with that in mind, we will take a look at most of the techniques and so forth, beginning with Chen style, then look at Yang, maybe a little bit at the Wu Yuxiang style, which is now a lot of times called the Hao family style, Wu style, and that will be it. But then last, but not least, since there is a style which is very popular in the United States, which was originated by Cheng Manjing, we'll take a quick look at that also. Now within the history of taiji, sometimes there's an indication that there's a precursor known as Chang San Feng. However, there's no really written or provable historical data to back that up, so we'll ignore that for the moment. Secondly, within the Yang records, particularly in the Wu Yuxiang style also, there's an indication of a man named Wang Tsungyue, but again, there's some question as to the credibility of that. Some say yes, some say no, so we'll ignore that and not go back any further. We'll just consider everything as originating from the Chen style. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and move on. In the first videotape that I did on basic building blocks for internal strength, I covered the two basic parameters that we're looking at in terms, in my opinion, the easiest ways which to get an idea, a feel, an understanding in which to begin developing internal strength. In this video, we can't cover it in quite the depth that we did in the first one, so my recommendation is if you get a chance to look at the first one, please do so. Okay, the first building block, and probably one of the most major one, is referred to as Peng or Pengjing, in the sense that the Jing in this case is like a ground vector coming from the ground up through the body and is expressed normally in the arms or what have you, and is actually controlled in the way it's expressed by moving the waist. Peng is also referred to as the substantial aspect of strength, as opposed to insubstantial, in which case if there is no Peng directed through your body to a particular limb, then the limb that doesn't have Peng strength in it is insubstantial. Sometimes you hear a reference made to cotton-covered iron, and this is a fairly good description in the sense that within taiji or the internal arts you should have a very soft, relaxed body, and you're using Peng within that soft, relaxed body, and yet somebody touching or feeling that or an expression of the energy from it, it feels very hard to them, and yet you may be very soft. We'll go into that in a second. Also, sometimes it's referred to as being full as opposed to being empty. In other words, the arm or what have you, the portion of your chest, it could be anything, your head, wherever the Peng is directed is full, wherever it is not is empty. Okay, Peng is considered the concealed strength within taiji for this very reason. Okay, when we look at directing strength through the body, essentially what we have to do is use the skeletal frame, the joints themselves and the angles of the body to direct and take a horizontal, let's say, incoming force and change it into a vertical component. So in essence, as I push on Kim Furry, who's helping me here, I push, and my horizontal push to her is taken, curved around, and goes down her back leg. Okay. Now, she helps this process by lining her skeletal frame up so that it accepts the push like this without her having to extend any force back toward me. And yet, even though I feel like a very solid resistance is there in front of me, she's very loose. Kim can, if she can move, okay, and she can move her whole body, and yet to me, it feels very solid. Now, in this helping this converting of this push into a vertical component, she's very mildly hyperextended her shoulder so that when I push here, the force goes up the arm bone, and then by very mildly rolling her shoulder forward, she brings the scapula against the back of the thorax fairly flatly so that she can bring the force from this point on her shoulder to her back. Then from her back, obviously there's bones, there's no problem following the direction that this takes down to the hip bone and down through the back leg. Now, to just stand there is fine, but within the taiji forms, we're going to have to learn to use this particular force, what have you, while we're moving. So to practice this mobily is a good portion of what a taiji form is about. Okay, so essentially, she can direct this where she wants it. It can be here. If she stands up, I can push maybe here, and she, in this case, directs my incoming force down to her leg through her body. So directing where this force vector goes with your mind is one of the very common aspects of Jing, Pengjing itself. So this sort of linked strength that we call Pengjing is very critical. Obviously, this can be looked at in terms of normal day-to-day physics also. When I'm pushing against Kim, if she stands very straight up, right, then as I push, she only has the distance from her arm, her elbow here, to the middle of her left foot, this far, to actually convert my horizontal push into a vertical component. As she gets lower, okay, then, and I begin to push, it's much easier for her because she's now allowed a considerable distance from here to here for the conversion of the horizontal force into a vertical component. You'll find out that it can be shown mathematically or easily that the best angle finally for the difference between my push and her foot would be 45 degrees from the ground up. And that tends to be the most feasible angle from which to actually use the Pengjing. And a lot of times you can see that, thanks, just a minute, in a martial art itself. If we take that 45-degree angle as the best angle which to propagate force from the incoming horizontal down to the ground, you can see actually it doesn't have to be like a board. It'd be very tough to go around leaning at a 45-degree angle. The human body can actually have curves and twists in it as long as the final resting places, say from the ground to the whatever object you're pushing against, are at 45 degrees. You still have the optimum angle which to propagate that. Now the problem is, of course, if you have a weird structure like this, and the human body in a sense is not the most efficient angle for this, if you get too many angles such as this one and this here, each angle itself has to be supported with some muscular tension. So the less sharp the angles are, the less force you have to use. So actually, it's easier for Kim to push against me like this, okay, than if she were to bend like this. She can propagate force to me, but now she has to begin to put some strain into her triceps and into the shoulder muscle while she's doing that. All right, so, and if she gets too close to me like this, the amount of force she can deliver, because she's very far off of 45 degrees now, is pronouncedly less. So here is an indication of somebody who's trying to convert either a push into a wall or accepting a push down. It's a little bit less efficient, okay? And if you look at a lot of the taiji forms, you'll see that classically, particularly in the Yang style, there were instances where postures were analyzed just on the basis of appearance. And as a general rule, you'll almost always notice that the back leg angle will be at 45 degrees, and the hand, which is actually transmitting the force is in exactly the same line from the angle of the leg, okay? And here I've drawn a quick picture of someone doing a form which is very high. The angle from his back foot, let's say where he's pushing from, to his hands which are applying the force is closer to 60 degrees at this point in time, and it's easily shown that that particular amount of force that you can generate with that is quite a bit less than somebody in a better posture, okay? All right, so bearing that in mind, I take Kim, I push here, okay, and she has to begin to learn to apply this force. So the first thing that you do when you're testing or checking this out with your friends is you push, hold, allow them to learn to adjust without any strain, okay, and now then go back down the back leg slightly and then right back up into the arm, okay? So a lot of force can be generated, but in this case, she's not using any arm or hand motion. She's going down, she's storing power in her leg and coming back toward me. She can add to that quite a bit by when she goes back down her leg. Now, she's maintaining very good pong, which means she's using almost no muscular effort. She can add to that by bowing her back out very slightly so that when she releases toward me, she releases not only the power in her leg and her hip, but also in her lower back, okay, so she comes back toward me like that, okay, and we get a lot more force generated. So that sort of practice that you can do with doors, your friends, what have you, is quite a lot of help to beginning to develop this prior to just using the forms. Okay, and when she does this, it's very, very critical. Actually, it's pretty critical when you do it. She's pretty good at it, but it's very critical that the shoulders stay very relaxed and the lower back stay very relaxed too. The two most common faults I always see are generally a very tight shoulder. You don't need it. Just sort of line it up, and a lower back that should be very relaxed too, okay? And pong itself is what they say, it's very substantial in one direction, okay, but it doesn't do anything in any other direction. It's considered void in all directions except the direction you push into it, taking it to the ground. Pong is the main manifestation or the main power behind what is known as opening strength. So opening is not done with the body pushing out. It's done with the ground power coming through you and pushing out. Okay, so next, let's move on toward the second parameter, connection. Now, connection itself is the complementary side to pong. The two work in conjunction, and the body is constantly flowing between the pong opening the body expansively outward, and then the connection of the body, or in its various aspects, contracting or closing the body. In some senses, the body itself cannot be controlled as a coherent unit without connection being maintained at all times. Let me show you a brief way to begin to work with connection, though. If I take Kim and have her put her right foot forward, and then I push from the back, it's very easy for her to take my push, particularly if I'm not obnoxious about it. And I help a little bit by pushing slightly down to get it started. It's very easy to just take an incoming force and let it go into the ground. All right. If I move up slightly higher on her back, she'll find with very little difficulty that she can also run that easily to the ground. Then, if Kim hyperextends her right arm, and she pushes it way out until I begin to feel the tension set into here. Well, if this tension is reaching all the way back to my fingers where I can feel it, that means then that the front of her hand must be connected back here also. Well, if that's true, then all I have to do is pull on her hand to actually be pushing back here at the same time. So if I go to the front, I can pull on her arm, and technically I'm doing exactly the same thing as pushing on her back. So she has to maintain that slight roll forward or rounding of the back in order for her arm to connect to her back. particularly to the lower part of the back. If I take her arm and I'm pulling it like this, okay, there's no problem because the path that's happening, my pull is going back to about here, which is the same thing as pushing, so now the push is still going down her front leg. If I change into a push, we're back exactly in the same situation in which we were testing and trying to develop Pong strength. So in this case, the push is going through to her shoulder. Because she's got it slightly rolled forward, it easily goes to her back and then down through her left leg. Okay, so then I can change, I can pull, I can push, I can pull and push, and all Kim has to do is redirect where the forces are going. Well, every time I pull, she allows my pull to go to here and goes down her front leg. When I push, she allows the ground vector to go through to the back leg. It's critical that she stay relaxed while this is going on, and that the changes from the front leg to the back leg happen in the midsection of her body. She doesn't want to tense, shift, and move her shoulders around. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to control these vectors going through our body. And by looking at the Pong, when I push her, and the connection that she's exhibiting from my pull down to here within her middle, we're able to get a very general sense of how the movements are accomplished. The fact that she's using and changing in her middle will, over a period of time, gradually begin to develop her middle, which is, in a general sense, is which way we're trying to go. Now, this pulling connection of the body is sometimes referred to as pulling silk. And you can see that because everything is slightly extended so that there's very minutely a slight tension connecting the whole body. If I take that form of movement and twist the body, I can begin to get into what is called reeling silk. Now, in reeling silk, one of the interesting things about it, for instance, if Kim twists my arm, okay, and I extend my arm very slightly, and over a period of time, it becomes second nature. When I do that, I can almost relaxedly hold my arm. She can't turn it, and what's happened is the body unit itself kicks in. Instead of, as you normally do, when somebody twists it, people tighten their arm. And this is what we're trying to get around in terms of internal strength. We stay very relaxed, and we let the body function as a unit, so when she twists, I have no problem controlling it. That's used in a martial sense in the fact that if I want to twist her arm myself, instead of twisting with local motion like this, I tie it into the middle portion of my body, and then I turn the middle portion of my body. And I don't have to use a lot of strength to do it. The amount of force that I'm able to generate requires quite a bit less muscular effort than normally when I'm using internal strength parameters. Okay, one other thing that we have to look at is bringing the arms down, not just twisting, but a lot of times we have forces that are involved pulling down, in which case the central portion of the body in conjunction with the rest of it, but mainly a lot of the pulling down is done with the body weight going down and a contraction, like an amoeba, let's say, in the middle portion of the body, pulling down. If I stay relaxed when I do that and I sink down, pulling a little bit with the oblique area of the abdomen and with the muscles in the lower part of the, in the small of the back, that way my arms can stay very relaxed, and yet I can generate a lot of force with that connection through the body, okay? And also, this connection of the body allows us to transfer the mass and inertia of the central torso in a lot of our strikes. You can use Pong to generate force out this way. We'll get into that later. But also, when I come down on an object, by just tying it to the middle portion of my body, I generate the power with the middle portion of my body, and it's transferred in a plastic mode into the arms or the legs in some cases, okay? And remember that connection, the full body connection itself, is deemed a part of closing, which we'll go into when we go into the forms more generally. Before we get into combining the Pong and connection parameters into a moving form, let's take a look at how they can be used in just a standing form to build up a lot of strength. It's a very interesting aspect of Chinese martial arts in the fact that a lot of strength can be developed in the body by just standing. But let's take a look at the parameters that are necessary to make that standing worthwhile. I've noticed in standing, or very, very slow movement too, that an odd feeling strength develops in people. And this is the sort of strength that a lot of people refer to almost solely as internal strength. Feeling this unusual strength that develops from either standing or moving very, very slowly. The standing itself, if nothing else, will develop a lot of great leg strength. And we'll find that in the internal arts, leg strength is one of the primary requirements because essentially using the body to propagate the ground and your leg strength in a very relaxed manner. So taking a look at connecting the body, first thing, if Kim will stand with her feet about shoulder width apart, the toes just very, very slightly and not much, and then sink down, bending the knees, okay, and then very gently pull the legs slightly apart. So now there's a very mild tension parameter, which we're going to get rid of pretty much in a moment. Okay, and then secondly, she holds her head up so that she begins to elongate and very slightly put a tensile connection down the spine. She holds the chin in a little bit to help that. Okay, and then thirdly, by taking the two arms out and then extending them so that the shoulders very slightly round forward and the back rounds itself, she can make a connection from her fingertips to her spine, okay? And of course you want to stay relaxed sort of while you're doing that so the lower back itself stays very relaxed, okay? A lot of times I tell people to just pretend you're reading a newspaper on a sofa and you just slump it slightly. Just let it relax, okay, and go back. All right, so now that she has a tension parameter, a very slight one, from her feet through her legs, up through her spine to the top of her head, and then from the spine out to the fingertips. If you don't quite feel it in your fingers, then rotate the hands so that the thumbs go forward, or if you want to, you can turn the palms out and bring the fingers very, very slightly back so that you feel the connection from the tips of the fingers to the back, okay? Once you have that connection and you feel the body connected as a unit and you're well over your feet, so your balance is very good, then you want to relax. Okay, in this case, let's go ahead and turn it back this way. Relax to the point that you feel that connection through the body only very tenuously, okay? And you'll feel the Pong strength that we were talking about a few minutes ago going through the body so that if I were to impinge, push slightly on the arms, she's able to channel that to the ground, okay? And she already has that slight tension, so she has her body connected. So standing there with this Pong feeling coming up through the ground, through her legs, and out to her arms, to the hairs on her arms, to the top of her head. In other words, filling the body with that Pong strength is how you do your standing, but relax to the point where all feeling of connection almost disappears, but not quite, almost, okay? Now then, that particular standing sort of posture will develop a lot of the very unusual strength which is referred to as internal strength just by itself. There are various postures that you can hold using this connection and the Pong strength to develop for various reasons, okay? One, okay, in a sense, you could say this is an open posture in the sense that she's generally letting Pong come up and hold her arms out slightly, and then she's just relaxed. In other words, this could be open. An example that's well known in taiji would be, say, single whip, okay? In single whip, however you hold it within your particular style, you essentially are opening the body out and allowing the Pong to come up through the legs and spread out, okay? So this is an open posture. Okay, there are examples of closed postures. You could go to a great extreme posture, which is sometimes done for martial training, which may look like this, Okay, see where everything is wound and pulled closed. Okay, this would be an extreme closed posture. Or in taiji itself, you may have postures which involve closing, squeezing the body closed. In this case, you feel the body contract very much like a clamshell. Even along its longitudinal axis, you'll feel the back bow closed, the arms pull in closed, and the legs, in some cases, you can actually pull the leg in and close like this. And this, you can hold a posture like this, and your closing power isometrically will be developed quite a bit, okay? A lot of the martial postures involve either open or closed positions. In some case, you may want to practice holding a martial posture. For instance, I can hold a posture that looks like this, in which case I direct my major portion of my Fang energy to this area of my arm and imagine something impinging on it, and I relax very much and just sink it down and practice this until the point a lot of strength builds up there. Okay? Now then, some of the taiji aspects or the standing posture aspects also have a lot to do with health. It's said that certain postures and certain angles allowing the Fang to go through in certain ways stimulate acupuncture points and meridians. Okay? That's a study in itself, and we won't go into it other than to mention that standing postures seem to affect that quite well. Even the sister martial arts, such as Xingyi, Bagua, involve postures which essentially have to do with propagating Feng strength through the body, and yet the body remains very connected. In Xingyi, let's say in Pichuan, a lot of times the posture is held to build up strength, because when the actual striking is done in something like that, you want to have a lot of power there. You can build that power that you're going to release just by standing in a posture that propagates Fang to the hands or wherever you need it to be at that particular time. Bagua walking itself happens to be very closely related to standing postures in the sense that Fang in connection are used, but it's these things are actually held while walking to build up that strength. Okay, so there's a great relationship between all the internal martial arts, and standing in its various formats contributes quite a bit to the power that's generated and developed in the internal martial arts. Of course, after standing and the strengths that it can develop, we can now go into the movement of forms. For movement to be quite good in form, you need to develop several strengths in your body. Of course, paramount of the strengths that you need to develop and become very comfortable in using is the feeling of Fang through the body and the connection. Okay. Secondly, if you want to reach into higher and higher levels, you have to increase your leg strength and your waist strength, the ability to move and turn the connected body. For instance, when the waist turns, it actually twists the body very much in the way that, say, a towel is used. If you take the towel and you want to turn the top portion of it, you can turn the top portion of it by turning the body, or the bottom part of it, okay? So, and the same thing happens with the body itself. When you turn the upper part of the body, you need to have some leg and waist strength to be able to turn it, not do it locally. And so this turning and directing of Fang and the connection through the body is done with the waist. We'll go into that more in just a few moments, okay? But as you do these forms or any of these movements, you don't force them. You're trying to learn to move your body in a different manner. And to do that means that you have to repattern all that muscular coordination you've developed since you were a child. So you have to learn very, very slowly to move the correct way. In the internal arts, the internal strength forms, it's not the particular movement that you do that's important, it's how you move the body. And this movement that we're going to be going through has to be continuous through the body. It constantly rolls and twists through the body. We'll make it smaller and smaller as we go along, without any gaps or deficiencies at all. The pong strength and the connection are always there. We don't make a movement like this and then suddenly do something isolated. The movement of the body as a unit is continuous all the way through. Now, we'll be learning this with some exaggeration. Okay, now in that case, we may make a movement that looks like this. Okay, there's an exaggeration there, and actually, technically, there's a waste of energy in the fact that I move my whole torso just to move my arm. As you get better and better in controlling the direction of pong through your body with connection and the driving of pong, movements become smaller and smaller, but it always helps to start out larger, work your way down to smaller movements. Ideally, you get to the point where a motion may start like this. As you get better, it'll be smaller, but you get to the point where there's almost no real external motion of the body. It's pretty much been moved so that the muscular movements themselves are there, but they're on such a small level that it looks, they say the body becomes more formless, and yet it generates power. This is where we want to go. Now, this directing of the pong strength through the body is what we'll be pretty much concentrating on. Pong is pushed through the body, starting from the ground up. Okay, so I push, and